Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome, folks. Steve Fielder here one more time with you on the Gone to the Dogs podcast. And we're down here in Orangeburg, South Carolina for the Grand American Coon Hunt. This thing has been going on since either 1966 or possibly 65. I know I was through here in 66, and I think that was the first one, but I could be wrong. It may have been the second one. But at any rate, here in Orangeburg, we had a beautiful day today, although kind of cold for, I guess, well, it's January in South Carolina, so we should expect some cold weather, but no snow this year. I've been to the Grand American a few times when it snowed, and it definitely was not that today. We had clear skies. We had a nice day for people to get out and visit the vendors and to go to the dog shows and to go through the dog barns and look at the stud dogs and all the things that make Grand American such a great place to be, and something that's really been a tradition for coon hunters now for that's, let's see, 40, 60 some years probably. So, but really happy this week for the podcast to bring to the mic a friend of mine that I've known for quite a long time. Met him back in my UKC days. I know he's been very closely associated with the Bluetick breed, for all you Bluetick lovers out there. And I'm going to let him tell his story today and try to keep my own chat to a minimum. But I'm very, very happy to welcome to the microphone Mr. Mark Hauck. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing fine, Steve, and thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure for sure. We've been bumping into each other a little bit since retirement years and all that. I finally gave up the futile attempts that I made to keep coon hunters in line over the year. And I retired in 2011. Tell us a little bit about your background of your work. What have you done, Mark? I know, but I want my listeners to know.
Well, I spent 23 years in the United States Army, all of them at Fort Bragg. I did 10 years in the 82nd Airborne. And
that's those guys that jump out of perfectly good airplanes, right?
Yes, we do. C-130s, 141s, helicopters. So
yeah, God bless you.
I loved it. And when I first went in, my recruiter thought I was nuts for wanting to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah.
But my grandfather was the one that initiated that into me.
Yeah.
Part of the 82nd Airborne in World War II. And Market Garden and St. Mary Glees and Nijmegen and Normandy. So I went into the 82nd and was assigned to the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. And after 10 years, had made E7 at 9 years, got a little bored. And
that's making it, brother.
Well, back in those days, you got promotion points for semester hours.
Oh, okay.
So I was going to school at night when a lot of my buddies were going downtown Fayetteville to the undescribed bars.
I got you.
So I earned my associate's degree, and it really helped me in promotions because, you have, 84 semester hours. Well, I got 84 promotion points. So, I zipped through to E5, awesome. Then E6, and then E7, and held positions of platoon sergeant. I did a stint at about 8 months as a first sergeant. And I kind of saw my career kind of not really going anywhere further in the 82nd. So I did the next best thing. I went over and ended up in 7th Special Forces Group, the Green Beret Group.
Yeah.
So I did 6 years with 7th Group, and then I had the opportunity to go behind a fence in special operations. It was called USASOC, the United States Army Special Operations Command. You know, got to have that short acronym for them long names. And and people don't really, you tell them that and they're like, what is that? And then you say, well, it's the old Delta Force. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know what that is. So I did 5 years with them and came out on the Command Sergeant Major's list a couple of times. And I was a little short. And then when I did come out and I was going to get promoted, they didn't have a spot for me. So the only place I could go was Korea. And I was like, I'm going to be a 37-year-old Command Sergeant Major, and the average age of a first sergeant in the second ID was like 46, 47. And I was like, yeah, they're going to really listen to me. You know, so I was like, but then talking over with my wife, I was like, well, maybe I'll go because it was only a 1-year tour. But I asked them, I said, well, when I finish my tour, will I come back to the soft community? Because I like being in special forces and special ops. And they were like, well, no, because be a Command Sergeant Major, you'll go where the Army needs you. And I was like, so I could end up in Texas in, you know, an office working on AFES stuff. And AFES is like, you know, where we got our, you know, commissary stuff and all that. And they're like, yeah, you could be. And I'm like, no, that's not for me. So I put in my retirement paperwork and I got a message to report to General Scott. And General Scott was the commander of JFK Center. And that's all the schools that run for the special forces and special ops, from sniper school, Halo school, scuba school. I mean, all the schools. Yeah. So I looked around the team room and I was like, okay, what did you guys do? I mean, how many times do you get called to a 2-star's office? Not many, other than, though I did a couple times. But I reported and General Scott looked at me and said, how'd you like to do me a favor? And I'm like, sure, sir. You know, what's an E8 going to tell a 2-star? No. And, he told me what he needed. He needed an NCIC for the Halo school. And I was a senior jump master and senior jump for Halo because I sport jumped on the weekends too.
Okay, I'm going to, for those of my listeners, and I've had Courtney Risk on here before.
Okay.
You know Courtney.
Yes, I do.
And, of course, that Halo thing was his gig too. Briefly explain what that is.
Well, it's high altitude, low opening. You might go up to, 12,500 feet jumping with oxygen. Once you get to 12,000 and higher, you jump with oxygen, but you could jump out at 8,000 feet or 7,000 feet. But it's basically what you see on TV where people are free falling. Mm-hmm. And then you open your chute and it's a square chute. So you might have a 5-cell, 7-cell, or a 9-cell. And that's the number of tubes I'm making a 0 in the chute for the air to pass through. So if you have a 5-cell, you're going to move very quickly. And if you have a wider one, like the 7-cell, you're going to go slower, but you'll cover more ground. So, you can do high-ho jumps, which means you can jump out at, 10,000 feet and pop your chute right then and just, fall for a long time under canopy. So that's what the Halo is.
I get you. Okay.
A sneaky way of getting into places without nobody knowing you're there.
I got you.
And so I was like, sure. And so I told him, I said, well, sir, I put in my retirement. He said, I can extend you. And I'm like, okay. I said, can you do that? And he pointed to his 2 stars on his collar and he said, I can do it. And I was like, okay. So he did. And the best 18 months probably of my career I ever had. I truly loved it.
Awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So then after that 18 months, you retired.
I retired.
Okay. So then what did you do? What does a guy do that's been in the military that long, I mean, is there really a culture shock in getting back into civilian life, or does it transition fairly easy?
Not for me, because I went to work for a company called Blackwater. And that was an overseas private contractor. So I did security work for them. And they, back in that time, 99, 2000, they paid extremely well. Put my daughter through college.
Yeah, well, good.
But when I got done with that, we packed up and moved to Northern Illinois, Stockton, Illinois. My brother lived up there, my dad, my mom, my sister. And my brother worked for Anheuser-Busch, and he had some friends that worked for a company for Pabst. And I went up and interviewed, and I got the job, so I became a Pabst rep.
Why don't you get me a beer sponsorship?
I mean,
I understand beer's not selling that well right now.
Pabst is. Pabst is like the #1 draft beer in Nashville.
Okay.
But so I went to work for them, and we handled probably close to 1,000 different beers. And I became very knowledgeable on...
I thought you were going to say an alcoholic.
No, I became very knowledgeable on beers, and I went to a lot of classes, and I studied, and I had Northwestern Illinois, I had a great territory. I had some fantastic customers. I did a lot of beer tastings and things like that. Up in Galena, Illinois, we had called the Great Galena Balloon Race, the big hot air balloons.
Oh, yeah.
And we would set up tasting tables when they were going up in the air with those things. And we might have 2,000-3,000 people come through to taste beers.
I know my emails are going to increase considerably here. Guys asking, how do I get a job like that?
Well, I was very lucky to get in, but the lady who was in charge of hiring me, she knew my brother, even though he worked for the competitor. But I think there was like 10 people that interviewed for this job. And I got the gift of gab from my father. At least my mother said that.
I got you.
And my daughter will tell you that I can sell refrigerators and deep freezes to Eskimos.
I got you.
So that being military, a little bit older than some of the younger people coming in. So I was a little more mature. Of course, insurance on the vehicle, the company vehicle, was going to be cheaper because I was, over 30.
I get
So that was
yeah.
We did beer, we did wine, and then we expanded into spirits. So I sold, vodkas, rums. We did like 8 different wines or wine companies. So I became very familiar with, explaining wines to people, how most people start off with like sweet wines.
Oh, yeah.
And then their palate changes, and then they go to a semi-dry, and then their palate changes again, and they go to a dry wine, like a Merlot or a Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
So,
okay, although I love wine, and I'd love to talk about wine with you all night, that'd be fun. But this is a coonhound podcast.
Gotcha.
So I got to get back on track.
Okay.
But very interesting, Mark. Very interesting. Okay. So you get out. All right. So let's rewind the tape here. How did you get interested in coonhound?
When I was probably 7 years old, my grandfather lived in Sardinia, Ohio, where I live now. And my grandfather hunted Bluetick coonhounds. My grandpa and Uncle Peony Miller and Uncle Vic Hook. Vic had tricolor, Peony had red ticks, and my grandfather had blue ticks. Of course, back then, they didn't, registered papers to them they kept their own pedigrees.
Yeah.
And every year they bred the best male to the best female. And if they came out red colored, Peony got them. If they came out tricolor, Vic got them. And if they came out blue tick, my grandpa got them. And I fell in love with it the first time I went coon hunting with them. And it was just an addiction from that point forward. I think I was maybe 9 years old, staying at my grandpa's for a couple weeks during the summer, helping do tobacco and stuff like that. I wanted to go coon hunt one night. He's like, "Oh, I'm too tired." So he said, "Well, here, you want to go?" And he handed me the light, handed me the 22 and like 10 shells, and he said, "Go." And the dogs, you could walk out with the lantern, and they would come out of the milk barn because they could smell the kerosene, and they knew they were going coon hunting. I mean, you do that nowadays with dogs, they'd be gone.
Yeah.
But they laid in that barn, and they'd come around and, mess around in the yard, but they didn't run off and run to the woods. They stayed in the barn. But you come out with that kerosene lantern and they smelled it, they knew they were going hunting.
Yeah.
No collars, no leashes. You just told them, "Hey, heel." And they'd walk along with you. And then you got close to the woods and you'd pat them on the side and say, "Hunt them up." And they'd take off to the woods, strike, tree. Well, I kept going and going and going, and they got worried about me. And next thing I know, my grandfather was driving around in his truck looking for me. Found me. And I was like 3 farms over. And I loved Bluetick coonhounds. I had one in high school. Used to go coon hunting, tree 1 or 2 coons on a Friday night back, in the early 70s, and you were getting $35, 40, sometimes $50 if they were a jumbo.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I went in the military, I was on a stall there, couldn't coon hunt because I lived in the barracks.
Yeah.
And then when I'm 85, I got put into a position where I had to go off post. Mm-hmm. So I rented a place that I could have a dog. And I went looking, and I met some people. I went to the local coon club, which was then in North Carolina, Rayford, Rockfish Creek Coon Club, a club that I was president of years later. But I found a guy that had a Bluetick. I bought her and started back into the hunts and the shows and everything else. Because my grandfather and my uncle, Ed, for Brown County Coon Hunters in Sardinia, I think it was like 10 years in a row, they won the club championship.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. When you talk about North Carolina and you talk about Blueticks, and there's so many names come to mind. We used to call them the Bluetick Mafia down there.
The Zone 5 Mafia.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
And I remember a lot of those guys. And let me test my memory a little bit, and you tell me if you. I know you know all these guys, no question about it. Carlton Rayner.
Oh yeah, Carlton.
Yeah, Les Rogers.
Yes.
Junior Duncan.
Yes.
The guy from down around Wilson.
Andy Powell and Torrance Wilkinson.
And Torrance Wilkinson. I'm a friend with Torrance on Facebook. Yep. Andy Powell, he's a chicken farmer, I think.
Yep.
And all those guys, we called them the North Carolina Mafia.
Yep.
They were always at BBOA days.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. Yeah, fun times. Well, that's cool. So then you had those first experiences on the farm. There was your grandparents' farm.
My grandfather's farm.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah. How cool is that, growing up on a farm where you can just whistle up the dogs and go to the woods out the back door?
Loved it.
It reminds me of the stories my dad told me about growing up on the farm in Tennessee with his cur dogs, he and his brother. And they would do that. They, at dark, they'd get the rifle and the lantern. My dad told the story about when they first went hunting, the parents would let them go, but they weren't to go outside of the range of that lantern light. If the parents couldn't see the lantern from the house, and the house sat on a hill, and there was a river bottom and the creek that went through, they had to stay within range. That was when they were real little,
right.
But if kids could grow up that way today.
If they could grow up that way today, you wouldn't have, in my opinion, the problems you now see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay. So then when did you start having your own dogs and did you get a cut of the puppies for Mark?
Well, no, but I got to hunt with them, and I always got to play with them as pups. And then when we started training, I got to help my grandfather and my Uncle Ed with that. My father, he went coon hunting a couple times, but he was not a coon hunter.
Yeah.
And but the youngest brother, Ed, who's still alive and loves the coon hunt.
Good.
We coon hunted a lot together. I used to come up from North Carolina and Bragg and bring my dogs, and I would teach them to fence because we had, it's all dairy farms.
Yeah.
But I taught my dogs to fence. And that way, when I would come to Bluetick days in Ohio or come up to Autumn Oaks and stuff, or Ashland, when the Bluetick hunt, I used to love it. They'd look at it and see me from, North Carolina. So they'd take me to some place with fences
and stuff.
Didn't bother me any. Mine could clear a 5-foot fence with no problem.
Yeah. Well, you got to plan your work and work your plan, right?
That's
right. Well, you're an interesting guy, Mark, and there's so many ways I could go here with this time that you've agreed to spend with me, and I appreciate it because I know you're taking your kids out to a Mexican restaurant. You said,
they're trying to figure out where we're going to go.
Family first, I always say, man. It's great. But all right, so at some point in time, I guess like I did, you decided that you wanted to get involved in coon hunting at the organized level. Was that for you just going to UKC night hunts?
Yeah, I remember I remember getting my first subscription to Coonhound Bloodlines. Back in the day, you had to have that if you wanted to know where the hunts were at.
Yeah.
So, I subscribed to it. I subscribed to Full Cry, and I subscribed to American Cooner. And, I was just getting back, wanting to get into the hunts and everything. And I looked in the book and I saw this Bluetick hunt in Clarendon, North Carolina. And I went down.
I've been to that club.
Yep. And it was old Junior Duncan.
Yeah.
And Carlton Rayner and Les
Man
Rogers.
in the little black hat. I always remember Junior, that little fedora.
Yeah, you always wore that little fedora, Earl Christmas and all them. And I went down there and I showed, and Junior come up to me, and he's like, he had that, non-filtered cigarette in his hand and that little hat on. He said, boy, he said, you need to join BBOA if you got a Bluetick. And I looked at him, I said, I think my grandfather belonged to that back in like the 60s. I'm like, what's it entail? And they went to talking to me, and next thing I know, Carlton was there talking to me, and then Les was there talking to me, and then Earl Christmas was talking, and then, Mike Hall and all those guys from down that area. And I'm like, okay, I'll join.
I give up.
But, it was a lot of fun. I met a lot of great people. And the more I competed in it and saw events like up around Eno River, Gary Carter and JJ Callahan and Craig Cooper and all them guys.
Yeah.
I went up there, and that was great coon hunting up in that area. Mm-hmm. And
I got to experience some of that when I was with AKC in Raleigh.
Yes.
Yeah. Went to all those clubs.
And Burlington and all of them.
Yeah.
And I really, I met some outstanding people, Don Bowles, Wayne Baker, and then someone who became my mentor, which Everett Dalton.
Oh, yeah.
In the foothills of the Blue Ridge Parkway there in Galax, Virginia.
Yeah, around Hillsville, Galax.
And Everett kind of became like a second father to me. And he always had us up to the house and give me a little relaxation time when I'd come back from a deployment or something. And, I bought
that immaculate little red brick house, if I recall.
He did, and then he moved up on the hill. Okay. And he had a nice little wooden house, and he had like 10 acres, and he had the dogs all.
His beagles, too.
Yeah. Oh, he loved beagles.
Yeah.
He would come out on the
Really
porch
great
with a
guy.
coffee, turn them beagles, puppies loose, and he had rabbits everywhere.
Yeah.
And they would just start running. He'd just sit there and listen to them, drink his coffee, and when he got tired, he'd call them, oh, and they'd all come running back. And he'd walk back out to the kennel and put them up.
He was a great guy.
But I got a chance to travel to a lot of hunts with Jim Myers, who owned the Smoky Two Dog.
Yeah. Jim did me a favor one time. He hauled a dog all the way to Texas for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good guy, too.
I traveled to a lot of hunts with Jimmy, Carol Watson. We went to like Texas to the Bluetick days in '91. Ernie Golding up in Virginia. I got a chance to serve. I became a board of director for Zone 5 and BBOA.
Yeah.
And I did 4 years. And, I had to laugh. One year we were up in Van Wert, Ohio for the Bluetick reunion when Tom Bradley and Emmett Brohard went together to put it on together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
One represented BBOA, the other one represented BBCHA. And I went to lunch with Dave Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Dave?
Very well. What a character.
He was. And we were eating lunch, and he kind of leaned over at me. He said, "What's your ambitions in the Bluetick breed, boy?" And I looked at him. I said, "You know what, Dave?" I said, "One day I'm going to be president of this organization." And he said, "Well," he said, "that's a lofty goal." And through my years of hunting and traveling and going to Missouri and Illinois and Indiana and Pennsylvania and all over the South, both hunting and competing, because I was fortunate. I mean, there was at one time I had 4 dual grand Bluetick females in my kennel. And Everett Dalton gave me half ownership in his female that he called Dixie, and that was Smoky 2's littermate sister. Everett put her in one hunt, RQE, won first place, and never put her in anything ever again. I got her when she was like 5 years old, finished her to night champion, finished her to grand show champion, won queen of the hunt at several Bluetick events in Virginia and North Carolina. So through my travels, both hunting, judging shows, and master hounds at shows, I just decided, and a lot of people that I knew approached me, and in 2000, I ran for president, and I won. And I was president until I handed it over to Mike Hayworth in 2010. And I think, was probably our most prosperous 10 years. We had hunts like on Friday nights where we had 225, 230 dogs. I mean, which was unheard of in the Bluetick breed and unheard of now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that, when I went to UKC, I didn't know very much about the breed associations except the Plot Association. And I served as president of that for a couple of years. We had a 2-year limit, a term limit, 2-term, and you're out. You go on the board.
Right.
And then when I was a director, when Fred Miller hired me to come to UKC, so I had to resign my directorship there, But that was the only association that I really knew anything about. But as I went to work for UKC, then I began to work closely with all the association, and that was back in 1983 when I went there, and. So I learned, though, right away that there was a couple of breeds that had more than one association. Usually there was one, per breed, and that was the chartered group for UKC, which being chartered by UKC meant you had certain privileges. You got to move your breed days around, where you wanted indiscriminately, but without worrying about date conflicts and all that. That was one thing. You got to have a seat on the rules committee. And there's been some changes since I was there, but it used to be that the Breed Association chartered controlled the breed standard. And some of that has kind of changed a little bit, I think.
A little. I think now you can submit stuff and UKC will look at it, but they still take it to the breed association.
Do they?
Yep,
That's
they
good.
still take it to them.
Yeah.
They have the, I guess, say on it. The membership has to vote on it, whether they want to change something.
Right. Well, that was pretty much why I was UKC. Fred Miller was the owner, and he was very much about that, having the members decide, those things. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is I learned that, lo and behold, the Blueticks had 2 associations, and the Redbones had 2 associations. And they each held UKC licensed events, but one was chartered and one was not. And in the case of Blueticks, the BBOA that you mentioned, Bluetick Breeders of America, was the chartered group.
Yes.
And that organization was really neat in my mind, how they conceived all these zones and developed the zone concept. And you guys were pretty much on your own on that as far as breed associations were concerned, to divide the country up into individual zones. How did that work a little bit?
Well, when Doc Furnham approached Bluetickers, he wanted something set up to where Bluetickers throughout the United States would be recognized and represented. At the time, before BBOA was formally established, there was another Bluetick Breeders and Coonhunters Association, but they were mostly in the West.
Right.
Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas. Mm-hmm. And Doc Farnham wanted something that would be nationwide.
Yeah.
And so when 00 Grant, who was our first secretary and treasurer, and set things up, he actually wrote our standards for the Bluetick Coonhound. They came up and decided they would break the country up by zones. And the zones would have their own board of directors, and they would have a chairman, vice chairman, and their own secretary and treasurer. And what encompassed was they would act independently of the national organization. And to this day, I mean, we've gone from 5 zones to 7 zones to 6 zones, but they still, to this day, have their own bank accounts. They've got 3 board of directors. When they have a national meeting or a national event, they have a voting process. But the zones, the chairman, which would be, I guess, equivalent to like a president, and a vice chairman, a vice president, and a secretary and treasurer. Like when we were in North Carolina, Zone 5, which consists of North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. And that makes up Zone 5. And it's still that way to this day.
Yeah.
Where we're at here in South Carolina is part of Zone 6. That's Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi. So, I mean, each zone is in a geographic area, and they operate independently, and it has served its purpose for many, many years.
Yeah. This is a great plan, and I guess I should have known, but I didn't realize that Grant was the one that set that up.
Yeah, 00 Grant wrote our standards, and
he was. Old guys like me will remember him and his writings in Full Cry and so forth. And
big time.
Yeah, he liked the bigger blue ticks.
And it's amazing that he had those bigger all blue dogs, but he wrote the standard. And his dogs didn't even meet the standard because they were bigger than that.
Yeah.
And but he looked at the generation of the Bluetick Coonhound, and he was like, I'm not going to write it for me. I'm going to write it for the Bluetick Coonhound.
And that's the kind of leadership you need, and try to keep the.
Well, Steve, back in them days, Bluetick days rotated year to year from zone to zone.
Right. That was the way it was when I. I
remember in '83, and when I first met you, Bluetick days would rotate from zone to zone,
right?
And it worked great for many years. And when C.W. Elridge came in as president, we noticed that when we would come from the Midwest and we would come south, our numbers would start to drop. And zone 5 numbers would go down. Then you go to zone 6, numbers would go down. And when you went to zone 7, like Texas, Oklahoma, numbers went down even more. And we figured it out that, you know, a lot of Yankee guys don't like hunting around snakes. Hey, it took me a while to hunt with them when I was in North Carolina.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
So,
Think about me in Florida.
oh,
Now they got pythons down there.
oh, I know. Our president for our new organization, Steve Burkholder, lives down there in Ocala or Cala.
Ocala.
And he's like, Mark, he goes, I see snakes on the golf course and everywhere. He goes, oh, I don't want to coon hunt down here. And I was like, I wouldn't coon hunt down there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that would be a whole podcast of why would a coon hunter move to Florida?
Yeah.
People ask me that all the time. I tell them it's one thing, a woman.
Yep. There you go.
My wife was, she and I both are second marriages, and I've told our story on here before. We were high school sweethearts and didn't see each other for nearly 40 years and ended up getting back together. And she was in Florida and I was in North Carolina, and that long distance relationship was not working out.
Yes.
So I made the noble choice.
There you go.
So your grandchildren are in Florida. You need to be by your But I think there was probably a little influencing going on there. But, yeah, well, it's very interesting. And, of course, with the Redbone people, they have managed to make two associations work. They have the national is their charter group, and then the American Redbone is the other group, and they have their own breed days and all of that
Well,
stuff.
a lot of people don't realize this, but the Treeing Walker has 3.
Well, yeah, they really do.
You got your National Treeing Walker Association, Southeastern Treeing Walker Association, and then you have your Southwestern Treeing Association. So there's room for a lot of people, and a group of us, decided that we wanted something different. We didn't want the typical politics and, the arguing back and forth and all that stuff.
Why do we do that?
I don't know. Jealousy, maybe?
It's part of it, and it's ego. We could talk about all the reasons, and sometimes I think we just, as human beings, we just like to argue for the sake of arguing. But we're strongest when we work together.
That's true, but I always used to tell everybody, Steve, there is some strength in competition because it makes you have to do better.
Yeah, without a doubt. Having been in a position where I was with UKC, and I was a UKC guy. I was a UKC guy to the bone. As opportunities opened for me, and I had to look at career choices and what's best for me and my family and all these things, I chose, to go different directions. Mm-hmm. I worked for 3 different registries. But I know that in each of those cases, when I was at UKC, I was looking over my shoulder at PKC. What are those guys doing? What are they doing? That's a good idea. And I've been always very competitive, as I know you have, and I always wanted us to be number one.
Oh, yeah.
So then I go to PKC, and then, you see these things creeping in like CHKC, which was there for a little while, and it went away and all. And now you see the pro sport group coming in, and they're coon hunters organization, but they're different. I guess when I said strength in numbers and all that, once we decide which flavor we want to be, we still need to be part of the banana split or the sundae. We need to be a part of the big dessert.
Well,
it's fun to be strawberry and you be chocolate and somebody else be vanilla. That's
correct.
A crazy analogy, but that's what comes to mind to me.
And they used to talk about combining the 2 Bluetick associations that are out there. And, even the years when I was president, I'd be like, folks, and I sat down with our blue book and their blue book, And 75, 80% of the members were dual members.
Yeah.
They joined both because both had a book. Both, some people, like if you were in Missouri, you're going to join BBOA and BBCHA because some of their hunts were very close to you there in the Missouri area.
Yeah.
And Bluetick hunts were strong in Missouri and Iowa and Illinois. And so,
from my standpoint, don't mean to interrupt you, but from my standpoint, and we're talking Blueticks here, there were very distinct differences between BBOA and BBCHA in the cultures of those associations, okay?
Yep.
BBOA was, in my view, more oriented toward the competition hunter. BBCHA was more oriented toward the good old boy. I remember going to Hope, Arkansas and going to the Bluetick Fall Roundup. And the old gentleman, I wish I could remember his name, he brought me a plate of fried catfish and hush puppies and coleslaw, and it was so good.
Oh.
And he said, boy, those fish slept last night in the White River. And it was just that, that kind. Then you go to BBCHA and your competition juices start flow. I mean, BBOA, excuse me, I misspoke. Go to BBOA. I can remember at National Bluetick Days at Wilson, North Carolina, and my good friend Torrance Wilkinson, he'll probably forgive me for this or not, Torrance, he could get the fire bubbling.
Yes.
And there was some kind of Fred Miller used to laugh about this, and I don't know if Torrance remembers this or not, but Torrance could get in the front of the room and get some kind of a controversy going, and it would be back and forth, and the guys are, debating this thing, and Torrance would be back at the back door talking about hot rod cars.
Turn around and walk right out and not miss a beat.
But no, the whole point is, and it was all great. I loved them both, but there was a different culture between those two associations.
There is, and
is that's still that way? I imagine.
I don't know. I mean, I see both of them putting on hunts and trying to put on more hunts. The reason we started our
let's stop. You've alluded to that a couple of times, and that's the meat of why I wanted to talk to you tonight.
Okay.
Is that there has now been a new Bluetick, a third Bluetick association.
Correct.
All right, let's break that down a little bit.
Cool.
What's the name of it?
It is called the All-American Bluetick Association.
Okay. Well, just for the sake of identification, who are the leaders?
Well, our president is Steve Burkholder, who was my vice president for 4 years when I was president in BBOA. Most people, if they haven't been following competition hunting, they obviously should know who Steve Burkholder is.
Absolutely.
Placed in the world, won Purina, placed in the world for PKC. I mean, Steve is a very seasoned competition coon hunter.
Absolutely.
Our vice president is Alan Bridges up by Comer or Lexington, Georgia.
Yeah, roughly in the Athens, Georgia area up there.
I'm the secretary and treasurer. My wife, Renee, is our membership chairman. And we have board of directors. I'm just going to go north and come down.
Okay.
We have Darren Fackler from Michigan.
Well-known name.
Okay. And we have Charlie Wyatt and Mike Hayworth from Missouri.
Okay.
I've got Dexter Watley from Texas.
Know Dex very well.
Steve Fussell and Brent Liscombe
Just
from
talked to
Georgia.
Steve today.
Charles Locklear and J.J. Callahan from North Carolina.
Right.
And Blake Lamford from...
I don't know Blake.
Blake's a young man and really has gotten into the Blueticks and competition hunting. He's a good friend of JJ's.
Okay.
And everybody should know JJ. JJ
Absolutely.
won Purina.
Yep.
And the good part is, we've got 4 past presidents of BBOA. We've got a secretary and treasurer who served 14 years in BBOA. We've got a couple of vice presidents, and several of the people I've just mentioned have been board of directors in BBOA.
Okay. Well, you certainly have got a all-star lineup of people there that I know, and people that are experienced coon hunters.
I think so.
And I think you've kind of persuaded Alan Bridges to kind of lean more toward the blue dogs than his English dogs.
We're working on them, but you can't take the English out of the Bluetick guy all the way.
No, that goes back to 46. That was okay. Without going into a lot of details, why do we need a third party, a third association?
The people I just named, all felt that things were kind of going in different directions, and they just didn't feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
And they wanted something that kind of went back to what we originally started with back in, like my times when, the late 70s, early 80s, and good hunting, showing, sitting around the clubhouse, sharing stories, talking, fellowship, enjoying ourselves instead of just rolling up, jumping out of the truck, enter, and then go hunt.
Yeah.
We want to kind of bring that nostalgic back so that some of these younger Bluetick owners can learn a little bit of history. And, I mentioned a lot of names, and they probably don't even know, who Everett Dalton or Wayne Baker or, Larry Jones. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that we've lost, and their knowledge they passed on needs to be passed on to others. And another thing we wanted to do is we are setting ourselves up to where a lot of these organizations, you have to either pay the organization like per dog or a lump sum, and we're not set up that way. The club, when they have our hunts, they get to keep all of their bench show entries, all of their night hunt entries. We're set up to work with strong clubs because strong clubs have good turnouts. And we don't want to have a hunt with just 10 dogs at it. We want to have a hunt that's strong and a lot of people show up. So we've designed 2 tiers. We have a tier 1 and a tier 2 hunt. And on our tier 2 hunt, Steve, we've got to where any breed can hunt for the $500 added purse, and any breed can show for the $250 added purse. And yes, we still have the Bluetick Awards, but we're wanting to bring and recognize all coonhounds. I don't care if it's a walker dog or a plot dog or a red bone or a black and tan. I'd like to see 10 of each show up at a hunt. And this way, the club wins, we win, and the coon hunters win. And that's what we're trying to do. We're wanting to bring that little bit of competitive spirit back, but we want to work with clubs, and clubs are our success. They are what keeps us alive, and we can't nickel and dime them to death.
Yeah.
They got to make a profit to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Absolutely. And I think the average guy out there that just wants to go lay his entry fee on the table and hunt and go home forgets that, in many cases, that these things don't just happen, and without those guides and without somebody to mow the grass and without somebody to sweep the clubhouse after the hunt and somebody to flip the burgers and all the things that it takes. But what they forget the most is there's a lot of overhead to maintaining a coon club. Let's take the electric bill, for instance, is astronomical, and taxes, and all of these things. And when there's nothing left, and I don't mean to be slamming the registries or the associations, but if the associations are pulling all that out, or the registries are, those guys, all they can do maybe is hold raffles or something like that to try to earning money. And like you say, they are the backbone of the whole thing.
They keep it going.
Yeah.
And, if you look just like on your own home, you've got the mortgage, you've got insurance, you've got your light bill, your water bill. All those things apply to a coon club.
Yeah.
And unless they've been fortunate enough to pay off the note, but then they still got taxes and upkeep.
Yeah.
So, you got to keep them solvent so that we can enjoy our hobby. And let's be honest, that's what this is all about. It's a hobby. It's a fun hobby that we enjoy. And showing and hunting dogs is something that, there's not a large number of us that do that. And we've got to take care of each other to keep the sport alive and growing. Mm-hmm. And you got to teach the young people what it's about.
Right. Well, the clubs have always been the backbone of the sport and will continue to be so unless you've got a national registry of guides that you can just call up.
Good luck with that.
And say, Mark, we want to send four dogs out your way, or are you doing anything tonight? No, it requires that guy in that club calling those members. You're going to be there. We got the club. Remember, we got the UKC hunt Saturday night. We're going to need some guides. Can you guide? Yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in any coon hunting event.
Oh, yeah.
It's like these guys down here that with walk-ons and all, they're going to be, looking at about 300 dogs in the woods tonight. Who's going to take those dogs to a place that's safe for the dogs, that they can treat some coon, that, that everybody's going to get the warm fuzzies.
Yeah. Well,
and how does that happen?
You got to have people.
Yeah.
And your members and supporting areas around you are your backbone. And without them, you can't do it.
Exactly. And guys, I'm those of you who are listening to this podcast today, in whatever circumstance, if you want a competition hunting, it's a great game. It's so much fun. It can be, if done right, it's just a real rush. It's great. Yes. If you love a hound and you've got an ounce of competitiveness in you, you're going to love it out there. You're going to sweat bullets sometimes. You're going to be so nervous you feel like you're going to throw up. You're going to be so much of an adrenaline rush at sometimes you just, it runs the gamut of emotion. It's just a fantastic game to play. But it doesn't just happen.
No, you have to put in the work. And when you put in that work and you do get that first win or whatever, you won't be able to sleep that night.
Oh, no.
Because
no way.
I remember my first big win, and I was fired up and drove home and was up all day, and I couldn't go to sleep. I was jacked.
Oh, yeah. Well, for sure. Well, you're a guy that has chosen to be one of those that makes it happen. There's that old saying, there's some people that make things happen. There's others that, sit back and watch it happen. There's others that say, well, what happened? But yeah, you chose, as I did a long time ago, and there was, there was motivation. There was money involved. It was a living for me, which I was so blessed to have that kind of job for all those years. But you got to have it somewhere down here. Why am I doing these podcasts, Mark? I'm 77 years old. Okay. I've been retired since 2011. If I didn't make preparations for my retirement then, I'm sure not going to get them now. And why am I still doing this? Because I love it. That's the only reason. I told several people today out at the grounds there as I talked to different people, I said, my role now in coon hunting is cheerleader. I'm cheering for all you young guys, you new guys, you guys that are still physically able to enjoy the sport, to be able to do it as much as you can, as long as you can. And there's a lot of things that want to stop you from doing that. Okay.
There
and
is.
some of it can be your own ego and your own attitude toward your fellow hunters.
Can be.
Can be, but and that's what that's why I still stay involved in it, because it's been my life.
Yeah,
you know
and I always, when I listen to some of your podcasts, Steve, it's kind of an educational tool to also, because there's a lot of education bringing up some of the people you've interviewed and talked to, and I mean, some of these guys got experience that shadow what I've got.
Oh, sure, me too.
And I mean, I was fortunate, but you could talk to Steve Burkholder or
Oh,
JJ, and they could tell you things
Oh,
of
yeah.
running Purina. And I was in the military. I could never do that because
Yeah.
I might be gone
Yeah,
60 days
exactly.
or 90 days. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was fortunate. I had some young guys that lived around me and loved to coon hunt. And they would just come and get a dog, get a tracking collar and a tracking system, and load a dog box up, and they kept my dogs hunted up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I
Very,
came
very
home, I was
valuable.
very fortunate.
Sure, absolutely. Well, okay. So basically, the premise of this new association is to try to get back to the roots. Is that
Correct.
right? Is that a good?
Yep.
Okay. So, what? All right. What have you done so far? What are your plans? Where are we going with this?
Well, I've got 2 events already scheduled in Ohio. We started our campaign using a raffle so that we can build up funds. We're starting to take memberships. This was going to be our first major event, and we came in Thursday morning at 10 o'clock when they opened the gates. We set up a very beautiful table. I don't know if you got a chance to see it or not.
I didn't.
But I mean, it was very nice. And then we came in today, and at 10 o'clock this morning, we were told we needed to leave. Some member from the committee said that they only had or were going to give 7 breed tables. And there was 3 Bluetick organizations, so we would have to share 1 table. And I was like, well, I don't think that's going to work.
Well, I'm hopeful that you'll be able to work that out with the powers that be, and they, a little understanding. Sometimes, it's easy just to say, well, you shouldn't have more than one. So,
Well, and
the
funny part is there's 3 or 4 empty tables down there still.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of jealousy because, I mean, we did look good. And so I went over immediately after getting all packed up and talked to Alan Gingrich. And I said, now, we are going to be allowed at the Winter Classic, right? He said, yes, sir. He said, you just tell me what you need. And he said, now I'll make it for you. Okay. But I'm showing Steve, but that was our table.
Oh, very, very, very nice.
Very professional.
Yes, absolutely.
And
well, I don't know. There's a thing within our sport that is always been there, I guess.
Yes.
And it always will be. And I have no idea who made that decision or who's involved. And but that's the kind of thing, look at your hometown. If you got a Ford dealership, where do you put it? Right next door to the Chevy dealership.
Yeah.
Or right next door to the Toyota dealership. Because when people come out with the mindset to buy a car, they want to look around and everything. And
competition.
And if your product can stand up, then you're going to make the sale.
Yep.
As opposed to somebody else. So that mentality, I would hope that somebody, I hate to use the word smarter. I'm not trying to act like I'm smarter than anybody. But, I think surely in time that sort of thing would be worked out. And, if I can just give you advice, and everybody's got advice to give, I have a little saying on my voicemail. It says, where opinions are, where advice is no, where opinions are freely given and advice is rarely taken.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, so as a joke, but anything new, people kind of push back against change. But if
I
my
suppose.
product can't stand the stress of competition, then I'm in trouble in this world. You know?
Well, if you can't take the heat, you got to get out of the kitchen.
Well, hopefully those kind of things will be resolved. But you've talked to a guy that's a very open-minded guy, a guy that I respect very much, and that's Alan at UKC. And I'm sure that Alan will. They have a podcast with UKC, and it's a good one, the Hunting Ops Podcast. What does Alan do? He opens up the headquarters building at Autumn Oaks and says, if you got a podcast, here's a place for you. Here's a booth for you. Come in, set up, do your podcast.
Yep.
And you got to respect a guy like that. He's not afraid. And it's really not competition because there's going to be a blue ticker that's going to like your way better than they're going to like BBCHA's way or BBOA way. There's going to be the next guy that comes down through the door that he's going to be loving the BBOA way and doesn't think yours will ever succeed. That's human nature, and that's people.
That's why we have Walmarts and Macy's and
exactly. So my advice down through the years that served me well is don't worry too much about the competition, and don't worry too much about the naysayers.
Yeah.
Because there's just going to be people that are unhappy.
My daddy, my old pappy taught me one time, he used to say, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah. And then he probably added on, it's all small stuff.
Yeah. He's like, he said, from my view, he was a big man. He's like 6'4". He's like, and from my view, he said, everything's small.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you got a couple of events planned. Do you have venues for those locations?
Yes, we're going to be New Holland, Ohio. Okay. And I'm working on one for hopefully in Hillsboro, Ohio.
Well, that's a good coon hunting area.
Yep. Well, Walker Days was there last year.
Down toward the Cincinnati area more.
Alan Bridges and Brent Liscombe are working on possible location in Comer, Georgia.
That's been a strong location for years.
Yes. We have one possibly up in they have a club meeting this coming week up by Galax, Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
And then I gave out several of our flyers today, hopefully up in here in South Carolina where they hold the state hunt.
Oh, Darlington?
Darlington.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to laugh. The gentleman that walked up looked at me. He says, I know you. And I'm like, okay. He said, didn't you used to hunt blue dogs? And I said, yes, sir. He said, yeah, you used to come down to our club all the time when you were up there at Fort Bragg. And I said, yes, sir, I did. So we got to talking blue dogs, and they said their club puts on the state hunt, and they do a red bone sectional. And he goes, but we've been looking for something else to do. And he goes, you got any paperwork on how you guys do your hunts? So I handed it to him. He's reading it over. He goes, I like this. He goes, I'm going to bring this up to the club next week.
Well, there you go.
If you have any questions, my phone number's at the bottom. Give me a call.
Sure.
So,
well, how does someone that says, well, something new, that sounds good to me, how do they get the information and how do they join your association?
They can join by sending our membership dues are $20.
Okay. Is that individual or do you have a family membership?
We have a $25 family membership. Okay. All the owners on dogs, if you're coming to our events, have to be a member. So if you've got 3 owners on your easy entry card, unfortunately, all 3 need to be members. If it's just you on the card, then you have to be a member. They can mail a check to us for either $20 for a single or $25 for a family. That covers you, your wife, your children, everything up to age 18. And we don't require handlers to be members, just the owners of the dog.
Okay.
They can mail a check to the All-American Bluetick Association, and they can send it to my address, which is Mark Hauck, or All-American Bluetick Association at 1231 State Route 321, Sardinia, Ohio, and that's 45171. And if they're interested in putting on our events, I'll be glad to email anybody our Tier 1 and Tier 2 events, because we have two types of hunts. And all they got to do is send an email to me requesting that information to Mark Hauck, Hauck 58 at yahoo.com.
Okay. Do you do social media at all?
Facebook, yes.
Are you Mark Hauck on Facebook?
We're All-American Bluetick Association on Facebook,
Okay.
and I have Mark Hauck on Facebook.
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm in Facebook jail for today because
you told
I
me
get in
about
jail
that.
all the time. I put on there on our website or Facebook page about our raffle that we're doing to build our funds up so that we can do events. And I look on Facebook, Steve, and I see people advertising tickets with guns for raffle and all this stuff. So I do it with just a picture. I don't even put the picture of the guns. And the next thing I know, I'm in Facebook jail. I don't get it.
I know, and there's no way to figure it out. That's for sure. You never know what you're doing. I had to do a stint one time in Facebook jail, and when after it was over and they let me post again, I said, "Well, I was in Facebook jail, and there was nothing but nice people in there, open-minded, clear-thinking people. What's the deal?" Well, Mark, it's been a joy to have you on the podcast.
I appreciate it, Steve.
Do you have some hounds at home?
Yes. Well, my wife does.
Oh, okay.
She has her Hall of Fame male, Blake, and I bought his sister so I could hunt her. She's a nice little dog.
Good deal.
Both of them are all blue.
Yeah.
We had bought an all blue female from Sarah up in Portland, Indiana. I can't remember her name. That's terrible of me.
I do that all the time.
Oh.
So it goes with the territory.
But we bought her and raised a litter of pups and sold her back to Sarah, and a little female called Josie, all blue. And we now have two pups out of that Renee kept, a male and a female. And they both made Grand Show champion and Confirmation champions before they were a year old.
Awesome.
So now they're getting beat up in the woods.
You get those scars.
Yes.
These are scars made while hunting are not to be penalized.
No, I don't penalize them.
I don't either. Well, Mark, it's great. I do wish you the best of success with the All-American Bluetick Association. I think there's certainly room for more. If it'll be a gateway for somebody that loves the Bluetick hound, which would be my wife. She thinks the Bluetick is the most beautiful hound of all. If it will influence somebody to try a blue dog and try coon hunting and have a good time and get their kids involved and all of those things and add numbers to our, when we consider the whole hunting population in the United States is shrinking. There isn't as many of us as there used to be years ago. And the number of treehound people among that number is infinitely small. So we need everybody. And it doesn't matter if you drive a Chevy or a Ford or a Dodge, or if you like BBOA, BBCHA, or the All-American Blue, you still need to be counted among the numbers of coon hunters that are supportive and understand that we all have, at the end of the day, we all have to pull together. We have to find a way.
At the end of the day, we all matter.
That's right.
And that's the major thing. And the most important
Blue
thing.
lives matter.
That's right. Blue lives matter.
All right, Mark, it's been a delight. I really appreciate you taking the time from your family and all the activities here at the Grand American. It's been a good day today. They say rain tomorrow, but the report's getting better. It looks like it might be in the morning and might move out. I hope so. But, folks, if you're, of course, by the time you hear this, the Grand American will be history. These things run about a week behind, but we definitely appreciate you listening. We thank our sponsor, W Hunting Supply. They can provide for you just about anything that you need in the line of hunting supplies for you or your hounds, and especially good technical support for your electronic equipment. So W Hunting Supply, DUSupply.com. That's going to be a wrap for today from the Grand American in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I'm Steve Fielder, and if anybody asks you where I am, you just tell them that old wore-out coon hunter, he's gone to the dogs.